Next session is Jason Henrich. He will talk about what to consider in thinking about fintech partnership. Jason.
Hi, and thanks for having me. It is always fun to be jumping on these virtually because I love the questions that fly in. So don't hesitate to put questions into Slido. They will be coming up. And I'd like to start by saying for everyone who saw Ning Lao's question in Slido, I am not a plant, nor is that my alias, because he had asked the question around, how do community banks, compete and be under resourced? Shouldn't there be a consortium? Well, I am actually CEO of such a consortium of 50 community and mid-sized banks that work together to drive innovation, adopt new technology, and make strategic investments. I also teach innovation and strategy at 3 of the graduate schools of banking, and I co-host Breaking Banks, which is the largest financial service podcast in the world. In summary, my wife would tell you I am a bank and fintech nerd. What I want to focus on is I have the pleasure of speaking with hundreds of bankers per year, probably in the thousands if you count the students at the graduate schools. And this is a summary of some of those interactions around what to make about the changing landscape, how should I think about innovation, and especially fintech. So one of those topics that often comes up is around small business lending, right? There are just so many players in the space. And the question that I often get asked is, which platform should I pick? Which startup should I partner with? And to that, I always ask, well, what problem are you trying to solve? And normally they look at me like I have, two heads. And they said, didn't you hear me? I said, small business lending, right? Well, here's the issue. It's not about picking the right vendor. It's really about understanding the problem you're trying to solve. Are you looking for automation of workflows? Are you looking to reach new customers? Are you approaching new segments? Do you want to change how you approach underwriting? There are platforms tailored to each one of those, and who you pick really depends on the problem you're trying to solve. One of the other things that often comes up is I'll hear, well, we're really more of a fast follower. Well, hate to tell you, but being a fast follower just doesn't work. Let me tell you why. My partner JP is fond of saying, well, it only really works if you're fast. And let's really be honest with ourselves. First, it can take a substantial amount of time to recognize either the problem or the improvement that a leader has made. That can be years after that new technology or that new product has come out. Then there's the time spent in actually finding someone to work with and the vendor selection. Let's be aggressive and say it only takes 6 months. And then you add implementation, which is another 6 to 12 months. And here's the doozy. Getting the technology and deploying it are the easy part. Making it drive value for you and your customers, well, that is an interactive and non-obvious process. On top of that, it only works if you happen to have the exact same customers, competencies, and strategy. While financial technology is remaking the landscape, the biggest change isn't the technology. That's a driver, but it's a fundamental shift in the way the business works, the way our industry is functioning. These are business issues that need to be thought through and strategies that need to change. The technology is a means to that, but it's not the starting point. When's the last time you really stopped and thought about your strategy? And I know what you're thinking right now. Our examiners bring it up annually when they ask for our 5-year strategic plan. The issue is strategic planning is not the same thing as strategy. In fact, we tend to overemphasize the plan and not put enough energy into the strategy. More often, our strategic plan is more of a to-do list. Enter a new market, build a branch, lower our efficiency ratio. Those are important things, but they are way stops on a much bigger journey. Now, what is strategy at its fundamental? It's the destination. It's not the set of activities I'm going to do to get there. It is the overarching goal and how I'm going to compete. I had the good fortune of working for Michael Porter, the godfather of modern strategy in the late 90s, and the importance of building a unique and valuable position was drilled into my head. This is how you figure out what is my unique competitive advantage. What do I do that others cannot? That is the moat that I'm building around what I deliver. Now, an important aspect of choosing what you do and what you don't do is really around picking the what segments can I compete and win in. If you look at, a small bank's website, call it a $500 million bank, it looks surprisingly like the $50 billion banks and larger, right? How often do we stop and rethink and say, here's the scope of what I could do and who I could serve, but I am choosing these and not these? It is really important to think about the activities you won't do in going after your unique strategy. And then last, and here's where it comes to the role of technology, we have to align our products, our delivery mechanisms, our people, our processes, and technology to support that unique strategy. Now, I will often ask bankers, what is your unique competitive advantage? And 9 out of 10 times I hear it's our relationship with our customers. Well, first, the definition of unique is it can't be your unique competitive advantage if everyone is pursuing that. Now, don't get me wrong, relationships are very important, but we often confuse personable with personalized. My dog loves the free treats, and I love the friendly welcome. Those shouldn't go away, but they're part of the interaction. I don't like being offered the same loan every time. A personalized interaction remembers my preferences. It looks across the array of data that the bank has on me, and it actually tailors what it can deliver in a way that even I might not even be able to conceptualize. Geography is also no longer a strategy. Historically, our branch footprint determined the boundaries of where we competed. Digital has changed that. We work with a bank in Hawaii, and I love their example of this. They said, we have a moat, like literally a moat called the Pacific Ocean around us, and really high real estate prices, which historically has enabled us to keep it local in competition. Except now what we're finding, those big brands that didn't want to come to the islands because they didn't want to have to support a branch footprint here, well, they're attacking us digitally, right? And that has become the challenge, is digital has changed the definition of what it means to be a community. Online communities can be defined in a variety of ways. People who love a certain geographic community may now also be served outside of that community in how you reach them. It really has changed the nature of competition. At the heart of figuring out what your compelling, unique, valuable position is understanding what problem your customers are hiring you to solve versus some other provider. This is really the place that I would say most of us as bankers need to stop and rethink the what do I do that is unique. Now, you can't really have a talk about innovation without throwing up something about Blockbuster, Netflix, or of course Kodak. But I love telling the story of Kodak from a different angle in my strategy classes. Now, one, most people didn't know they're actually the ones who invented digital photography. And then they tried to squash it. They put NDAs on the inventors. They tried to stamp it out of the market and keep it locked in the basement. But once they realized that the film business was being wiped out, they didn't just sit on their haunches in the same way that Blockbuster did. They actually poured hundreds of millions of dollars into their digital business. They brought in executives from other technologies, a number from Motorola, and they actually did really lean in and became a market leader in the production of digital cameras. Here's the problem. They didn't stop and rethink what business they were in and the problem they solved for their customers. Now, those of you old enough to remember, you might remember you got your digital camera. They had you upload to the Kodak EasyShare platform. And then what they ask you to do? Oh, do you want to print those out at the closest pharmacy or retailer? Even offered free doubles so you can share your photos? What's funny is for having share in the title, they missed the fact that's the problem they were solving for customers. They thought they were in the business of printing photos. They were actually in the business of sharing memories. Does that remind you of any other businesses out there? Literally billions of dollars of value have been created in digitally sharing, from Facebook to Instagram to TikTok, you name it. Kodak had that lead and they gave it up. Now, when we think about aligning our resources against this, digital for the sake of digital doesn't get there. If you're just slapping a digital process on top of what you did in an analog world without stopping and rethinking how delivering this might actually need to change, what is the experience the customer is expecting, it isn't about having a pretty mobile app or a better interface for loading your loan application. It's about rethinking those fundamental processes and really going back and saying, if I'm going to deliver something better against those unique customer needs, I need to rethink the whole thing. Which brings me to, this isn't about going and interacting with the cute fintechs and saying, oh, I'll take one of those and one of those and one of those, and that somehow has solved my problem. Now, COVID hasn't made this any easier, right? The shift to digital, really is being driven faster than ever, and we do need to keep up. However, you should go to places, like this conference, to the Finnovates for ideas, but that is the beginning, not the end in picking a partner. Now, if this feels overwhelming and you're a bank that says, how could I possibly do this? Going all remote and having branches closed and figuring out, hey, do we need a clean desk policy when that desk is now the kitchen table for a loan officer? Take some heart. It is much easier to get started than you might expect. Start small. You don't have to solve all of the problems at once. First, pick an area to focus. It should align to your overarching strategy, that one you went and revisited and said, what are we uniquely doing that the rest of the marketplace is not? And pick a small portion of that. You don't have to have it all figured out all at once. In fact, the bigger the challenge you try and undertake all at once, the more it's going to slow you down. Because the real key is to start moving. You're not going to come up with the right answer in the boardroom, thinking and thinking and thinking. You will only learn by doing. Steve Blank is famous in the software circles and startup circles as an early innovator himself, as an angel investor, as a professor at both Berkeley and Stanford. And he had this astounding realization that is, for as smart as entrepreneurs and venture capitalists are, answers lie outside of the four walls, that you really need to go test things. And this is why it's important to start moving. This isn't a core conversion where the path is well trodden and highly predictable, and I can tell you plus or minus a day what's happening at week 32. If you are doing something that is truly new, you should not be able to forecast with 100% accuracy what will be happening even months from now, right? And so one of the things that as banks we need to become more comfortable with is we can have the broad destination in mind, but we're not going to know every step of the journey, the twists and turns. That is why it's important that we become nimble, that we, along the way, we are confident enough to change directions and to say, based on this learning, I need to go this way as opposed to where I thought. And this is really one of those things. Another question that had come up in Slido is, what's the difference between a vendor and a partner? A vendor is someone you hire to do a job that is well understood. A partner is someone who goes on this journey with you, that understands the hard work really does begin after implementation. The partner, from some of those who spoke just before me, are the ones that are going to say, hey, we've had an insight and we need to go this direction. Or based on what you're telling us, we need to optimize in a different direction. That is not just picking that right vendor. The partner really means going on the journey together. So how do you approach that? Well, first, recognize it isn't about new technology. That becomes the means and not the end. Start by revisiting your strategy, mapping what are your competitors doing and what are they good at and what are you good at? What things do you need to quit doing? Start small. You don't have to solve it all at once. It doesn't even necessarily require a new vendor. Some of my favorite examples of the banks we've worked with, they actually take existing technology. Let me tell you the story of one. They were approached by a very large new technology provider that had convinced them that they needed to deliver an Amazon-like experience to their small business customers. In fact, they were going to get just-in-time offers that said, based on your profile, other small businesses like you also bought these services from us. Here's the problem. The way they approached it was a multi-million-dollar, multi-year implementation. But the reality is they had what they needed to go test this concept in this new strategy of customer intimacy. They could take an extract from their core. They already had the data scientist on staff that was supposed to be developing these just-in-time offers. But instead of delivering it, through just-in-time, an AWS-like experience, popping up as an ad, they turned it into a PowerPoint presentation that their relationship managers went around and delivered to their small businesses and said, based on your profile, we think these other services might be of interest to you. You would not believe the amount of learning that came through that interaction. At the end of it, their COO looked at me and said, this doesn't feel like innovation. it feels just like we're working a bit smarter. And at the end of the day, even those small steps, testing and learning your way into big answers, is where you want to go. There's no reason to stop and say, I need a full plan for where we end up, because it's too unpredictable. You're going to have to plant 100 seeds to get a single flower. Not everything you will try will work. In fact, that's good. This isn't about making big bets better. It's about making faster, incremental bets that drive more learning. And so on the way, if everything is working, I would challenge, you're probably not doing anything that's interesting or new. You're just doing incremental improvements that are safe, which is good, but you probably don't end up where you need to be strategically to remain competitive. Now, startups, the fintechs that have raised lots of money, do have an advantage that I like to call the competitive advantage of desperation. They have to adapt in big ways and make big shifts before they run out of money, right? A startup is nothing more than a company that needs to find a way to make money before they run out of money. That's not the business we're in. In fact, we have the advantage of customers, which allows us to test things, and we need to take advantage of that and get moving, not wait for those right answers to fall out of the sky. And it can feel like a zoo out there. Trust me, I know. Feel like I'm living in it. But it is not about picking that one right way. It's about actually taking in the whole experience and going down the path. So I'm not sure if any questions had come in, Eric, as my phone was buzzing, but I'm happy to take them now in chat or put 1 minute and 40 seconds back on the clock for others. All right, so no questions yet. So hopefully this is giving you a sense. Later I'm going to have a conversation with John Ryan from the Conference State Bank Supervisors. One of the things we're going to be addressing is often we hear that, ooh, we can't do this because of compliance. Well, John and I are going to unpack that that's really a cop-out, that from the regulatory point of view, the idea of doing new things is not only important, it's vital to keep banking alive and relevant.